This House do now adjourn. Greg Clark.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it is a great privilege to have been allocated this debate. I'm grateful to you and to the Minister, who has been particularly hard-working today and has spent many hours at the dispatch box, and I'm grateful that even after midnight she is continuing to attend to her duties. The subject that I would like to bring to the attention of the House, and in particular to the Minister, is a simple and straightforward one, that in my constituency is proving to be a case study of failure which is causing great anxiety to many of my constituents. And the simple and straightforward proposition is this. If new development is to take place, it must always be accompanied by the new infrastructure that's necessary to make that development work. In some respects, that is so obvious that it's impossible to imagine that development could take place without it. It would be unthinkable, for example, to build a new housing estate that did not have access to the electricity network. But in many cases, as many colleagues will know, development adds to the demands placed on existing infrastructure without improving it. Examples of this we know happen all the time, whether the demands placed on GP practices, on school places, on the overall road network. But the area that I want to concentrate on this evening is on sewage and draining services. Not only is it possible to get away with building new homes without investing in this very necessary infrastructure, but even more unfairly, the consequences fall not solely or even mostly on the developers or the occupants of the new properties, but on the rest of the community. And this happens in these other areas as well. If the GP surgery runs out of appointments, if the local school is full, if the roads are gridlocked, and in this case, if the sewers are overflowing, it is existing residents who are principally affected. Now, in concentrating on water, I want to do so because it, first of all, illustrates a wider problem, because it's a pressing local issue for many of my constituents, and because many of us, to be frank, I say to the Minister, have come to lose patience with the role of Southern Water, the principal provider of those services in my constituency. Now, because this is a short debate, I want to use the example of the town of Paddock Wood, but it applies almost identically to other parts of my constituency with particular concerns in the parishes of Hawkhurst, Capel, and in the towns of Tunbridge Wells and Southborough, but many other villages as well. The capacity of the sewage and draining network that serves Paddock Wood is inadequate for the current population of a little over 3,250 households. I will give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Thank you for giving way, and I did some research on this beforehand. It's not just with the issue of sewage and drainage disposal, it's also access to safe drinking water. And I understand that may be a problem in that constituency as well. And does he feel that it's important that people are able to access safe drinking water? And similar to Northern Ireland Water, or NI Water in Northern Ireland, the onus is then to provide a safe supply and an accessible supply, and one that can happen at any time.
Well, the Honourable Gentleman is an assiduous defender of his constituents' interests, and the fact that he's here after midnight to do so, even on a debate on Tunbridge Wells, that he fights the good fight for his constituents, is a credit to him. And I'm giving an example of drainage and sewerage services because it is of particular importance for the reason that I will give. The town of Paddock Wood is situated in a low-lying area, quite close to the River Medway, and frequently floods. When it does, the overload of the current network has unacceptable, unhealthy, and frankly disgusting consequences for residents. One of my constituents, who lives in an estate near the centre of the town, described how for 10 years her front garden has been regularly flooded with water containing sewage, toilet paper, and other waste coming up from a manhole cover in the middle of the road outside her property. A resident in a different part of town described how he and his neighbours have submitted complaints time and again about, once again, sewage and toilet paper washed out into their road. The Paddock Wood Town Council and the local borough and county councillors, to whom I pay tribute for their tenacity over the years have pressed and highlighted the problem, demanding that it's addressed, and warning of the obvious need for investment in greater capacity. Southern Water themselves have admitted that the infrastructure needs upgrading before any additional demands on it can be contemplated. In 2015, Southern Water told me in a letter that, and I quote, "there is current inadequate capacity for any future developments." This followed a capacity check that was carried out by the company in 2014, which established the need for, and I quote, "general upgrades to sections of the Southern Water public sewer network and a requirement to increase the capacity of the Station Road wastewater pumping station by approximately 8%. Indeed, the company's then chief executive wrote to me saying, and I quote, "it will be our recommendation that the pumping station be upsized before any further properties are built in this area." Paddock Wood is now subject to plans for at least an additional 1,000 homes across 3 major developments on top of the 3,250 homes approximately that are already there. Initially, Southern Water's advice to planners was consistent with their previous statements that the local network was at capacity. On 2 of the sites, 300 dwellings at Church Farm and 375 at Maskell's Court Farm, the Borough Council informed me that, and I quote, "additional off-site sewers or improvements to existing sewers will be required, and these details have to be agreed with Southern Water." At Church Farm, Southern said, "we advise the developer that they need to install a parallel storage sewer to cater for additional flows. We will install the sewer," they said, "under Section 98 regulations, which will be funded in part by developer contributions." However, as housing development has proceeded to be built in Paddock Wood, the promised infrastructure investment has not appeared. Indeed, the current chief executive of the company wrote to me in 2017 to say, and I quote, "I can confirm that we are not currently in receipt of a valid Section 98 application for any of the proposed sites in Paddock Wood." And the company said, "we have a legal obligation to connect new developments to the sewerage system, and we are not in a position to formally object to plans for development." Moreover, Southern have written to the Council to say that new sites can commence development without the necessary improvement that they themselves identified as being needed having taken place. Plans to upgrade the sewerage network in Paddock Wood, despite repeated discussions with the Paddock Wood Town Council, have come to nothing. Residents of Paddock Wood now see development happening that they were assured would only take place when the sewerage system had been upgraded to deal with the current overuse and the current problems that they're facing, and to remove the worsening of that situation, let alone to cope with the development that is planned. Now, I met with Southern Water and members of Paddock Wood Town Council and officers and members of Tunbridge Wells Borough Council and Kent County Council on the 7th of September. All these local representatives were dismayed to discover that the previous plans were not even going to be proceeded with, and that the company had gone back to the drawing board, in effect, to consider what could be done about the capacity in Paddock Wood. In the meantime, new homes are being built and connected to a sewerage system that is already so inadequate that it results in sewage flowing through the streets and the flooding of existing properties. Enough is enough. The people of Paddock Wood are not NIMBYs opposing all development. Quite the opposite, in fact. The town has, without fuss, accommodated more new development compared to its size than most other towns in the southeast of England. It is perfectly reasonable to demand that in doing so, residents should not be taken for granted and taken for a ride. Now, I've focused on the town of Paddock Wood this evening, given that this is a short debate. But a sense of distrust and, in my view, justified scepticism applies to Hawkhurst, to Hawkenbury, to Capel, to Tunbridge Wells, to Southborough, and to many other communities within my constituency. And my neighbour, the Honourable Member for Tunbridge and Malling, wanted me to make mention of the fact that many of his communities are also affected by pretty much identical problems. My constituents are not surprised that the company was fined a record sum this year of £126 million for failures including a lack of necessary investment. The saga of Paddock Wood leads local residents to endorse the verdict of the Chief Executive of the water regulator, Ofwat, that, I quote, "The company is being run with scant regard for its responsibilities to society and to the environment." So I would like to ask the Minister three things. First, will she intervene to insist that Southern Water present comprehensive infrastructure plans without further delay to the community of Paddockwood and others in my constituency where development is being considered, and that they implement those plans? Second, will she strengthen the powers of local councils to require water companies to make an assessment of the infrastructure needs and not to approve new development until it is certain that this infrastructure will be provided before or at the same time as the development? And thirdly, will she accept that if as a nation we are to support development, whether it's in the town or the countryside, commercial or residential, the rule should be established and acted upon that there is always I before E, infrastructure before expansion? If we do, Madam Deputy Speaker, then we can look forward to a future in which new development is not seen as something that is bound to make existing residents' lives worse, but instead offers the prospect of improvements to the quality of life for everyone in the locality. My constituents want that assurance, and they want action, and they want to see it now.
Minister